Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we have what I love. I love when we do this, a repeat guest, which means they have so much knowledge and information to share that we just couldn't get it all in an hour. But I have to laugh. And we were laughing about this before the program started. I looked, and it's been 8 years since I have had this guest on. And so it's going to be fun to catch up also. So please join me in welcoming Nikki Rausch to our program today. How are you doing, Nikki?
I'm doing great. I can't believe that it's been 8 years. And thank you so much for having me back. I'm really honored.
It's so much fun. And I'm really looking forward to this. So let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into this. So as the CEO of Sales Maven, Nikki Rausch has the unique ability to transform the misunderstood process of selling. With over 25 years of experience, entrepreneurs and small business owners hire Nikki to show them how to sell successfully and authentically. Nikki has written 3 books, including her most recent, The Selling Staircase. She also has a podcast called Sales Maven, which you can find anywhere on your favorite podcast platform. So again, Nikki, welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, tell us, and I always like to ask my guests, how did they get to where they are today? So tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us kind of what's been going on in the last 8 years besides, a pandemic.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Well, how I got to where I am today is I started in sales through a college project, got my first professional sales job, and was in the tech space for many, many years, selling technology, closing big multi-million-dollar deals, having the time of my life, traveling like a crazy person. And during that time, I started studying neurolinguistic programming. If that's a new term to anybody, it's the study of communication. I started studying it because I thought, well, it'll probably make me better at sales. It actually just made me better at life and a better communicator. And when I decided to start Sales Maven back in 2013, I thought, well, I'm going to combine what I know to be that works from my sales experience with my NLP background. And I'm going to show women who struggle with those sales conversations how to make it easy and how to make it authentic and how to really be strategic so that you move that conversation from this like great, introduction to actually closing business. And so my business was born from that. Since I was last on your show, gosh, so many things have happened.
I know.
Let's see. I've written a few more books. I think when I was probably first on the show, I had maybe written my first books. I've written a couple books. You already mentioned I started a podcast. I moved to a different state. I was living in Washington and now I'm in Idaho, and business has been phenomenal. I think probably when I was talking to you, I was mainly working with clients kind of in the Seattle area. Now I have clients around the world, which has been phenomenal and amazing. And yeah, so life is good. Business is great. And I still feel blessed every single day that people show up and seem interested in what I have to share. And they use it and it makes an impact in their life and their business. And that's what kind of feeds my soul.
I love it. I love it. And it really has been such a change, especially in the last 3 years, right? Where we went from, okay, we have to serve this little part of our world we can work with people worldwide. I think it was going that way. And then COVID, obviously, you go to work on Friday in an office and on Monday you're at home and you're like, oh, wow, this is fun. And so technology had to go immediately, take several leaps ahead. And to me, it's been so cool because one of the things that I've really focused on is my out network, the people that aren't here in the Atlanta area. I haven't been to an in-person networking event since before COVID. And so all of my networking is online, which means all of my sales is, from around the world. And I think that's been so cool to be able to expand like that.
Yeah, same. I think I didn't do this intentionally because obviously I didn't know COVID was coming, but kind of around the end of 2019, I realized that I was starting to attract people from around the world and that it didn't really make sense for me to put on these, master classes that were in person, kind of in the Seattle area. So I had really started transitioning to my business being done primarily over Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, when 2020 and the COVID hit,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a huge, my business grew in 2020, but it didn't impact me in the way that it impacted a lot of people because I had already kind of made this transition. But I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that we have this technology that allows for me to support people. I'm always so surprised when somebody shows up from Greece or from, it's like, how did you ever find me? I have no idea. There's the podcast, but even that's so surprising. I think now it's been downloaded in like over 100 countries, which I'm always like, how did they ever find the podcast to begin with? It's so interesting.
And it's all in English and you're in Croatia.
Yes. Yeah. And now I get clients that hire me and they're like, well, my English isn't that great, but so now there's that barrier of like trying to deliver something that will make sense and help them figure out how do they translate that into because obviously I barely speak English well. So that's always
me.
It's like I'm doing my best.
I tell people English is my second language and my first and my third, and I still don't have any of it right.
So yeah, it's just been a great experience. And I'm so, it's amazing that we do have these tools that allow for us to do business the way that we do business because 20 years ago when I was a traveling sales rep getting on a plane to go everywhere, this type of business wouldn't really probably have, well, one, I wouldn't have even ever been able to imagine it. And two, I don't even think it would have been possible.
Well, and I think that has obviously been one of the biggest shifts from people who were used to 2.5 years ago doing in-person sales. Yeah. They knocked on doors, they went to networking events, they did all of these various things. And then all of a sudden they could not. And depending on where you were, you might have come back sooner, you might have been somewhere where there was more restrictive. But how have you seen people, because obviously sales is a skill. And and being in person is very, very different than over Zoom. It is great. We can see each other, but we do miss some things. And so how have things changed when people are now doing a lot of sales virtually?
Well, I think you're right. What you just said was you're spot on in that it's not the same as being in person. And so I think there are things that you should do as the salesperson to ensure that you're building really strong rapport with the other person and that you're not making it about you. It's super easy to make it about you because you can see yourself on camera unless you turn off, your view.
Right.
And so it's easy to get distracted by looking at you and not paying
what's my hair doing?
Yes. I actually have done some podcasts about this. I've written blog posts about this. Like, be ready when you show up to that session that you shouldn't be looking at yourself on the camera and adjusting your hair and like doing what I call the duck lips of like, how's my lipstick look? And all that. Like, people can see you, right? Like,
I know
just because you can see yourself like it's a mirror, the other person is seeing you like you're in the room, you would never do that when you walked into a sales meeting.
I know that's been kind of one of the funny things with Zoom is the stuff that we've seen. It's like, okay, you also wouldn't go to a meeting with not combed hair, a tattered t-shirt, not prepared. And so, I love the Zooms at the start where it was like, I understand you don't have a separate space. And so you're in your bedroom, but please make your bed.
Yeah. Think about what's your environment. Like, what can people see behind you? I know I was just having this conversation. A good friend of mine who has a book coming out here probably about the same time this episode will drop. in there, she's a behavioral economist. So I want to drop her name and give credit where credit is due. Melina Palmer. She has a podcast called The Brainy Business. And she has a book coming out, which is, I think, what your employees, oh gosh, now I feel like a jerk. I'm not going to say it right. What your employees need but can't tell you, or what your employees want and can't tell you. And in there, she even talks about the importance of like your background, because if, sometimes now you see people and they have the fake background. So then when they move like
the palm trees,
head,
I'm like, you are not on a beach. Stop that.
Yeah. But how that can create a little bit of mistrust, because you're essentially saying to the other person, I don't trust you to see what my background is.
Right.
And with sales, that's such an important concept, because we've all heard with sales, your job is to create the know, like, and trust. That's how you can earn somebody's business. So what are you doing now in the way that you sell? Are you doing things to build trust, or are you unintentionally doing things that diminish trust? And your background and how you show up, and are you prepared? All of these things establish your credibility. And that goes to trust.
Right. And I think, those of us who had been doing this for a long time, we obviously didn't switch, but it was the people who hadn't done it, who I think thought, I'm home, so I can be casual. I can be in front of the unmade bed. I've done some really funny podcast interviews especially during the height of COVID, where people were at their kitchen table and people came in and made sandwiches and, all of these things.
Yeah.
And, and so we did get used to that. But at the same point, you were still looking at it and thinking, are they taking this seriously? Because they don't seem to quite be, I'm putting this in my little air quotes, professional. And, and you're right. It is about the know, like, trust. And when it comes to money, people are finding any way they possibly can to not give you their money.
Yeah. Yeah. This conversation just made me think about, this was kind of, oh gosh, it probably had to have been maybe in 2019, may have been a little bit earlier, doing work with Zoom. Got hired by a company to do some training for their sales reps. So it was the owner of the company and his sales team on Zoom, and he showed up to Zoom with no shirt on.
Oh, goody.
And so the whole Zoom session with all of his people, and I'm thinking to myself, like, would you actually show up to a business meeting without your shirt on? Like, I was so blown, and honestly, I was so stunned by it, and it was kind of making me giggle. So I was doing everything I could.
It was sidetracking you for sure.
Giggle that this person was like, you realize you don't have a shirt on, right?
And you can see yourself.
Business meeting. Like, I understand that you're paying me. Like, I get that. But your salespeople are they're in the room as well.
Right.
How would you feel if they showed up to a business meeting with no shirt on?
Right. Yeah. Now, if it's Michael Phelps, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, if your job involves taking off your clothes, maybe. But my job does not.
Yeah. And yeah, and it really is, it's about building those relationships. And it's like you said, with the background, and I understand not everybody has a place where they can have a nice background, things like that. But there's certainly pretty easy ways. And now, of course, Zoom gives you the opportunity to blur it, which I'm not wild about that either.
Me either.
But yeah, you can get, a sheet of plywood, hang a sheet on it, and you've got, a wall that you can put behind you. So it's, and it's about that first impression.
Yes.
Whether you're in person, whether you're on Zoom. And so how is it what do we need to do to make sure that it's a positive first impression?
Well, one of the things on Zoom in particular is, and this might seem really simple, and yet it's often something people don't do. Just like if you were meeting somebody for the first time, when you're showing up on Zoom and you're seeing them for the first time, and more importantly, they're seeing you for the first time, treat it like it is an important first introduction, and say your name, introduce yourself. Yes, your name is at the bottom of the corner of the screen, but if you have a name that might be hard to pronounce, or if people like, is it, I'm trying to think of a name that sometimes it could be,
Well,
You know,
they often say crier for my last name.
prior. Yeah. See? So if you want to help people be successful and build that know, like, and trust, be willing to say, like, hi, Deb, it's so nice to meet you. I'm Nikki. Even that,
Right.
it just shows that little bit of something versus this just happened to me this week where I showed up and the person just, he just launched right into something. There was no like, hi, Nikki. There was no welcome. There was no, and I was kind of taken aback. And I remember thinking to myself, he didn't do anything to establish any rapport,
Right.
didn't create any safety with me at the beginning. Now I just went along with it because I was like, I don't really
Yeah, I
know
mean,
what
you couldn't backtrack and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm."
but it did make me feel like okay, so I'm just going to sit here and take all my cues from you. But it's like those little tiny things that can make a difference. So when you show up on Zoom for the first time, just like when you're showing up at a meeting, whether you're sitting at a coffee shop or whether you're meeting at a, at a conference room table, you would still reach out and shake somebody's hand and say your name.
Right.
So do the same on Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is Zoom is more impersonal because, there's a screen, there's all sorts of stuff. There could be thousands of miles in between. And so, we need to remember, no, we've got to bring it back to being personal.
Yes. I had an NLP teacher. She used to always say, just because it's high tech doesn't mean it should be low touch. And as a matter of fact, sometimes when it's high tech, there should be a high touch component as well, so that you really are creating that personal connection. Because it is hard. Like you're flat on the screen, but I'm not flat here. So I got to do things to do everything I can to build that rapport, to create relationship, to create that know, like, and trust.
Right.
So be willing to extend yourself in ways that you might think, well, I don't have to do that. Well, you might not have to, but what would happen if you did?
Right. Right. I just had a thought that flashed through my head. It's the weirdest thought in the world. We yell at the football players on TV. And of course, it does nothing because they're on TV. And I think, we feel sometimes that way on Zoom. We can't have that personal connection because they're on a screen. And, no, we need to go back and, as you said, introduce ourselves, and other little things like, if there's something cool behind them in the camera, mention that, or, and, maybe it could be other little things like we do in person. Hey, it's great. I haven't seen you since. Things like that. Again, to remind us, okay, we're not those actors and inanimate objects on the other side of a screen.
Yeah. And, because I think the other thing too is if you act like, well, I'm just trying to get to the end of the meeting, right? Like, I'm just going to follow this script, or I'm just going to, like, this is how every meeting goes. So I'm going to say this, you say this, then we move on. You start to sound robotic,
Right.
and you miss that. Like, we love inflection, right? In voices, and we love stories. We love that way to connect with people. So there are things that you can do on Zoom that show your interest, that show your energy. So yes, they can't feel your energy. They're not in the room with you, but at the same time, it's just like when we used to sell over the phone, and you would hear
and they always said, start with the smile. They can tell when you're smiling.
They can tell when you're smiling. Well, now they can see you smile, but do everything you can to extend that to, again, just how can I build stronger connection and relationship here? And so the other thing is, you can't be looking off to the side, or, you have to look into the camera, even though they might be on this other screen. Well, move them, like move it so they're on the screen where you are, and look into the camera, because they can tell whether or not you're looking at them or if you're looking away. And you think, well, I am looking at them.
Yeah, but I really didn't want to talk to their ear.
Yeah. So.
Well, and like what I do with this for our Zoom call, since it's just the two of us, because normally when you do Zoom, you're right next to each other. And so then you are looking off in an odd direction. You might be looking off screen, but you're really looking at them, obviously. And so I have learned I reduce the size of the screen until we pop up on top of each other.
Yeah.
And then I've got my camera where it's on a plexiglass stand. And so then I put you right behind it. So I am really looking almost straight into your eyes to be speaking.
That's perfect.
Mhm.
Now, one of the things I do with mine is if I'm having a session with a client, I actually turn off my self view.
Mhm.
And then it's like I'm just
Right.
talking to them. And so I find myself very distracting. I'm a high kinesthetic. I talk with my hands so they can move a lot. That
Mhm.
distracts me. So I have to remember to keep my hands still so as to not distract the other person. But I just turn off my self view. And then now they're getting my full
Right.
attention.
Mhm. Right. And it's just, again, it's like if when we're talking to somebody in person, the second their attention wanders, it's done.
Yeah.
I might, in fact, I've been known to just like end in mid-sentence, things like that, because I know they don't care anymore. Now, if it's, they look, oh, something caught their attention, then they come back. That's very
Yeah.
different than just, okay, what's over there? I'm just going to kind of look over there. Or like I said, talking to somebody's ear because they don't have the camera in the right place. And speaking of that, that's another thing that, it's like, okay, we've been doing this, folks, now for quite a long time. I don't need to be looking up your nose at the ceiling. Put your camera in a good place. If that means you're stacking books on your desk, so that you can either put your laptop higher or whatever. But, we don't want to talk to somebody's ear, nose, top of head in person. So please don't make us do that on Zoom.
Yeah. Or where they cut off half their head or,
Mhm.
like these, like, it's like,
Right.
wait, you can see yourself on camera too, right? So
Mhm.
you know that I can
I
only
know,
see
that's the thing. I'm
half
like,
of
you
their
see what
head
we
or half their
see.
face, or
Mhm.
it's like, what's going on? Yeah. So I think it's with everything, being thoughtful will go a long way. And
Right.
with sales, to
Mhm.
build know, like, and trust, be
Mhm.
thoughtful and think,
Right.
what is the experience like for
Mhm.
the other person?
Mhm.
How am I showing up?
Mhm.
How might they am I doing everything I can to establish a powerful first impression?
Mhm.
Am I building credibility? Do I come
Mhm.
across as, whatever your keywords are? Mine are kind and credible.
Mhm.
So what can I do to
Right.
depict kind and credible,
Mhm.
to do everything I can to establish that first impression? And if there's something that I'm doing that's like more convenient for me, but isn't getting that
Right.
kind and credible across,
Mhm.
I'm going to change. I'm going to adjust.
Mhm. Right. And it's funny because anytime we talk sales, we all go, "Ew, we don't like sales. Ew." And right, and of course, we're not in business if we don't do sales, so get over it,
Amen.
folks. We've
Yep.
even if you hire someone to do your sales, you're still in sales, and so, we need to make sure that, especially in this remote world, that we're taking care of all of that and
Mhm.
building those relationships, because that's what it comes back to. Like I said, I got my little dollar bill here and I'm going to hold on to it till the very last minute. And I'm not going to give it to somebody if I don't trust them.
No, I'm a big believer in voting with your wallet. So
Mhm.
if somebody doesn't show up
Mhm.
in a way that builds
Mhm.
credibility, that shows that you're not just a walking dollar sign to
Mhm.
them, they're definitely not going to earn
Right.
my money. So, don't give your money to people
Mhm.
who don't show up prepared, who don't
Mhm.
make an effort to
Mhm.
make you comfortable when
Mhm.
you're in the position of being the client,
Right.
and vice versa. Don't expect to get money from somebody when you're not willing to extend yourself and be flexible to put the other person at ease
Right.
when you're wanting to earn their
Mhm.
business.
Right. And I talk about making the face when we say we're in sales. And I think that's because we all have bad experiences with
Yeah.
sales. We think of, you want to buy a car and you get pounced on by four people when you drive in the lot, or
Mhm.
you're in a department store and you get spritzed with perfume. All these various things, right? That's
Yes.
kind of good thing that we don't do that. I don't go shopping anymore. But
Yeah.
we've seen the people who selling is all about them
Yep.
and making their commission, their, whatever it is. So they don't care. I mean, it's like they've got the neon sign over their head that says, buy for me, buy for me, buy for me. And they're
Mhm.
going to browbeat you until you buy from them, or, just totally run away. And so the big thing is we think, I don't want to come across that way. So how do you work with people to show them, you can be successful in sales without being the buy for me, buy for me, buy for me people?
Yeah. My whole platform is built on rapport first. So everything I teach, the
Okay.
foundation is rapport first. And realistically, and I say this over and over again, sales is something you do with people, not to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, if you have this attitude that in order to be successful at sales, I have to do something to somebody, that feels gross. That feels manipulative. That feels like I don't want to be the person who does something to somebody else. Like we don't want
I
to
don't want
be
them to
that.
walk away and go, ew. You know, I have to
Yeah.
wash my hand. Ooh.
Right. Yeah. And people are going to judge you. That's just the nature. So if you start looking at sales, if you can reframe it and go, this is a collaborative experience.
Mm.
I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. My job is to understand what's going on for you. Who are you as a person?
Right.
What do you need? What do you want? What's like your ultimate desire? And if I have a solution that would meet that want, solve that problem, meet that desire, then I'm obligated to put it in front of you with your permission. And
get that
let
with
you
your
decide,
permission.
yes. And let you decide whether or not it's the right thing for you right now. So, this goes back to the difference between a with type of sales experience and a to type of is, are you talking at people or are you talking with people? Because we get talked at all day long from, it's constantly, you should do this, you should do that. If you don't do this, your life is going to fall apart. It's the shaming, the pain points, we love to get, browbeat people with all of these things. One of the ways that you can learn how to have with conversations is ask questions.
And then listen.
Yes. Questions allows for the other person to participate in the conversation. So you no longer have to word vomit your whole sales pitch off of it onto anybody, because frankly, we're sick of getting word vomited on too. If you can start to ask questions, then you can help. One, when you ask questions in a strategic way and you structure your questions, the questions should start to help the other person, the prospect in this case, start to identify, oh, Deb has something that I could benefit from, or I'm interested in more about what she's got going on. So it helps them start to identify themselves as an ideal client. And it also helps you to figure out, am I talking to an ideal client or am I talking to somebody who, nice to meet you, but I got to bless and release because you're not the right fit for my business or what I offer. So you got to ask more questions.
Right. And it really is, you ask those questions and then, there are times where it's like, okay, this isn't a good fit. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, it could be that you go, oh, it's not a good fit for me, but I know who is, and so I'm going to introduce you. Those are always great, right? But, and I think so many times we think that when we're selling, that we're a failure if we don't sell. And, and so when somebody tells us, no, we're not interested or whatever, we're like, oh, I'm crushed. Nah, it just means that at that point in time, they didn't need what you offered.
I don't even know if I said this back when I was on the podcast in 2014, but I've been saying it a long time. So I apologize if I'm repeating. But one of the things I think about with sales is we are so afraid of getting the no. We're so afraid of this, like, oh my gosh, this person's going to reject me. So one of the analogies that I often share with people is, think about if you go to a restaurant, you have a really delicious meal and you've enjoyed it, you're super satisfied. And the waiter comes by and says, can I show you our dessert menu? We have a fantastic dessert menu. And you say, you know what, not tonight, but thank you so much. I'm so full. It was delicious. We'll come back another time. The waiter doesn't go back into the kitchen and go, can you believe that broad? I offered her dessert. She turned me down. I'm so rejected. And so I think when you approach sales as like a no is rejection, of course you're going to feel uncomfortable with it. But when you start to approach it as, that waiter just issued an invitation, and your job is to issue invitations and let people decide for themselves. Yes, I'd like this, or no, I wouldn't. And neither one is objection. Not objection, sorry, rejection.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and we should, of course, be taking all of those no's, which hopefully there's not a lot, right? But learning from them. Did I not communicate well? Did I not ask the right questions? All of those various things. And then figuring out, okay, was it truly, no, go away, don't ever talk to me again? Or I'm willing to consider it in the future. And I think that's one of the things that people get really hung up on is they get in the, I'm never going to talk to him again, because, they got rejected once and they don't want rejected again.
Yeah, sometimes no is just a not now and not yet. That's
Mhm.
all it is.
Mhm.
And, I teach and I wrote my second book about buying signals. People will give you buying signals that indicate there's some interest there.
Mhm.
Those buying signals often, if they give you a buying signal and you issue an invitation and they decline, the next time you see them, engage in conversation or in some way, or keep in touch with them in
Right.
some way, because chances are they might give you another buying
Mhm.
signal. I one time was at it was a networking. I met somebody through networking. We went to have like a coffee chat together. And over the course of an hour and a half, she gave me 7 buying signals. Now, every single time she gave me a buying signal, because I really do walk my talk. If I teach it, I do it.
Mhm.
So the first buying signal she gave me, I issued an invitation. I invited her
So
to
what's
work.
a buying signal? Give us an example.
So an example of a buying signal, well, one, it's a verbal or a nonverbal cue that indicates interest. So that's kind of the
She might have
crux of
leaned
it.
towards you,
Could
or
be that, or it could just be that she, they ask about a service. She was like, "So how do you work with clients?"
Mhm.
That's a potential buying
Right.
signal.
Mhm.
You'll only know if you check it out. So you answer the question and then you issue an invitation. So in this particular case, I told her, I work with clients in 3 ways. I do private sessions, I have a master classes, and then I have a group coaching program.
Mhm.
Is any of those something you'd be interested to learn
Mhm.
more about? That's me issuing an invitation on the
Mhm.
buying signal, following up on it.
Mhm.
Now, she didn't really give an answer. We just kind of kept on in the conversation.
Mhm.
Now, again, over the course of an hour and a half, she gave me
Mhm.
like 7 buying signals.
Wow.
People are often surprised because
Mhm.
I like to also have stories to tell when I
Mhm.
get to teach. And I issued 7
Mhm.
invitations. People are like, "You issued 7 invitations in an hour and a half." I'm like, "You better believe it."
Right.
Because every time someone gives me a buying
Mhm.
signal, I'm just going to check to
Right.
see, "You
Mhm.
ready now?"
Mhm. Do you want to
I'm
dance?
Yeah,
Yes. Do you want to?
that's
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
That's it. And she actually ended up she didn't hire me there in that meeting, but I
Mhm.
said to her at the end, "I get a sense that there's some way that we might work together. So I'll
Mhm.
tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna send you information on my VIP program,
Mhm.
and there will be a link to pay. And if you
Mhm.
pay it, then I know you're in, and I'd
Mhm.
love to work with you.
Mhm.
And if you don't, that's okay. I'll look forward to seeing you at the next
Right.
networking
Mhm.
meeting." And I sent her the link.
Mhm.
2 days later, she paid it. She became a great client.
Nice.
So the thing
Mhm.
is, you people will give you these signals.
Mhm.
Now, there are things you can do that will help these signals come up quicker
Mhm.
in a conversation,
Mhm.
but when you get a buying signal, your
Mhm.
job is to act on it. Don't
Mhm.
just treat it like a throwaway line.
Mhm.
And I'll give you an example of one that people often it seems super, super obvious, but they miss it.
Mhm.
And it's when people ask you about your price. A
Mm.
lot of times when people ask about price, the person will say, "It depends." That is
Right.
never the answer to the price
Mhm.
question, even though there's a part of you that's right now thinking, "But Nikki, it does depend." I
Yeah, it
get it.
does. It depends on what we're doing. How can I give them a price?
You can give them a range and then
Mhm.
you follow up with an invitation. So you could
Mhm.
say, "Well, working with me can range anywhere from $147 a month to, 2,000.
Okay.
Is there something in particular that you'd be
Mhm.
more interested in learning about?"
Right.
Like, that's me just following
Mhm.
up to check to see.
Yes.
Or I could
Question,
even
question,
say,
question. Mhm.
yeah, I could even say, it ranges between this and that.
Mhm.
What were you looking to invest in
Mhm.
sales coaching? Like, I could just ask the
Mhm.
question and see what happens.
Mhm.
And then if they go, "Well, I really want some private coaching,"
Mhm.
what is that? And then I can give a more specific answer. And then I can follow up with another
Mhm.
invitation. This is what it costs to do a private coaching session with me every
Mhm.
month. Is that something you'd like to
Mhm.
do? Wait
Right.
and see what they say.
Mhm.
Chances are, if they're giving you buying signals,
Mhm.
at some point they're going to say yes to
Mhm.
hiring you.
Right. And I think, you mentioned one of the things we do is we rush it.
Yeah.
We ask one or two questions, they don't seem interested. Oh, we're done. You know? And it's back to, as you were saying, relationships and know, like, trust. We
Yeah.
want to get a little more information. Tell me more before I'm going to give you my money.
Yeah.
And very rarely is it, that you get a sale almost immediately. I mean, people, they just don't function that way. And if they do, it's only because they've done a lot of pre-research. So they were pretty much sold before they ever even talked to you.
Yeah, they've already been warmed up in some
Mhm.
way. They warmed themselves up. And
Right.
I teach a 5-step process to the sales conversation. And this
Mhm.
is the latest book. It's called The
Mhm.
Selling Staircase. And the idea behind the 5 steps
Mhm.
is it's a structure of a sales conversation. And I teach this to people so that they understand, what step am I on right now with this interaction, like
Right.
where we are.
Mhm.
And then instead of trying to jump from step 1 to step 5, which is
Right.
a huge mistake.
Yeah, because you're going to bang your knees and fall down.
That's right. And nobody's going to do that with you. It
Mhm.
feels awkward. And we've all been on the receiving end of somebody just showing up in our email saying, "Hey, Nikki, I looked at your website. You totally need a rehaul. Here's our pricing.
How many of
Here's how you
those do we
should."
get a day?
I know. And I'm like, You're skipping steps with me.
Mhm.
You went right from step 1 to step 5.
Mhm.
And you cannot do that in the sales conversation. Now, in one conversation, you may move somebody through all 5 steps,
Mhm.
but like you said, that's not as common now as it used to be, or they've already warmed themselves up. They don't show up on step 1, they show up on step 3.
Mhm.
And then it's easier to go from step 3
Mhm.
to step 4 and then to step 5, which is
Right.
the close.
Mhm.
So the idea here is to understand, where am I in the conversation?
Mhm.
And my job is to be the guide, because the client or prospect, they don't know what to do next.
Mhm.
Your job is to guide. And
Mhm.
instead of going right in for that hard sell,
Mhm.
which is probably going to scare people off or
Mhm.
overwhelm them in some way, if you're willing to follow this process, you'll find that it's easier for the prospect to make a decision with you.
Mhm.
You build that know, like, and trust factor.
Mhm.
And now it's easy for them to say yes.
Right.
They're like, "Here's my money. Here's my
Mhm.
credit card. Let's
Mhm.
move. Let's go." So yeah, I'm a big believer in sales conversation.
Mhm.
There is a process to it. When you can follow a structure, whether it's, and again, this isn't about teaching people how to sell like me. It's more about giving people a structure so they can
Mhm.
bring their own personality, their own
Right.
authenticity
Mhm.
to the conversation, show up and be themselves, but
Mhm.
be strategic.
Mhm. Right. So what are the 5 steps?
Okay. Step 1 is introduction. So we
Mhm.
kind of talked about the power of building a,
Right.
excuse me, that it's important that you build a powerful
Mhm.
first impression. That's step 1.
Mhm.
Step 2 is create curiosity. This, by
Mm.
the way, is the most missed step in the sales
Mhm.
process. Most of us don't even think about, do I know how to create curiosity when I'm talking about my business
Mhm.
or in a conversation with
Mhm.
somebody? And yet, when you can learn how to start to create curiosity, you start to attract your ideal
Mhm.
clients. They will lean in, they'll have
Right.
questions for
They
you.
will say, "Tell me more."
Yes, amen. So once you create some curiosity, a lot of that, what happens next a lot of times is a buying signal. And once you
Mhm.
get a buying signal, you invite them to step 3, which is discovery. And now some people think that means it's something really, really formal, and it could, depending on your business, but it could also just be part of the conversation.
Mhm.
But this is really where the questions start to come up.
Mhm.
And the idea here is to ask really smart questions
Mhm.
that let them self-identify,
Mhm.
"Oh, Deb has something I want some more of,"
Mhm.
or "I'm so interested in what
Mhm.
she's doing." So you ask really smart questions. The one thing you don't want to do in step 3, and this is a big mistake people make, is you ask a question, the person gives the answer, and you start selling. And
Mhm.
then you ask another question,
Right.
give an answer, and then you sell some more.
Mhm.
And this goes on. And what will happen is, one, that's a huge time suck,
Mhm.
because you'll spend way too much time and you'll overwhelm and confuse
Mhm.
the prospects, so they won't decide.
Mhm.
So you got to have a clean discovery process. There's no selling in step 3. It's asking really smart
Right.
questions. And then, when appropriate, you're going to ask permission to move to step 4,
Mhm.
which is proposal. This is
Mhm.
where you're laying out the ways that you can work
Mhm.
together. So I never say to somebody, "You know what, based on what you said, you should become such and such client with me. You
Right.
should do this, you should do that." I would say, "Based on what you shared, I
Mhm.
have an idea of a way we might work
Mhm.
together.
Right.
Would you be interested to hear
Mhm.
about that?"
May
Let them
I
say
send it
yes.
to you? Mhm.
Yes. Let them say yes. So that's
Mhm.
discovery. Now we go to proposal. Your job in proposal, step 4, is to lay out a really clear offer. You
Mhm.
have to stand in your place of credibility and recommend what you know the client needs, not what you think they can afford.
Mhm.
And that's a really important distinction.
Mhm.
So you recommend what they need,
Mhm.
and then you issue step 5, which is the close. You have to issue close language. This is the second most missed step in the sales
Right.
process.
We wonder why that doesn't close. Well, it's because we didn't actually, in essence, say, "Give me your money."
Yeah, you never gave them the question to
Mhm.
let them decide.
Mhm.
It's the, like, "Well, I'll send you the proposal and I'll follow up with you next week." That is not a close.
No.
If you're gonna send a proposal, you say, "Let's get a time on our calendars to circle back, review the
Right. You can
proposal."
ask any questions you might have,
That's
and
right.
mhm.
And then I'm going to say to you, after reviewing the proposal, is this something you'd like to move forward with? I'm going to issue closed language. And the reason for that is until you issue closed language, a lot of times people haven't even decided to hire you
Right.
yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just giving their brain an opportunity to give them an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And until we know what their answer is, which could be yes, no, I have a question, I have an objection, could be like, I need to think about it. There's a lot of things that could happen, but we won't know what those things are until we get there and issue the closed language.
Right.
So those are the 5 steps: introduction, curiosity, discovery, proposal, and close.
Right. And I think the other thing that people need to remember is we can go up and down those steps. Might be that we gave the proposal and it wasn't quite right. So we need to go back to discovery.
Yeah.
And so just because you went up to, doesn't mean you can't take a step or two back.
Yeah, if it turns out that you recommended a proposal for somebody that they were like, oh, I didn't really have any idea that that's the kind of price point we were talking. Yeah, you probably need to ask some questions. And maybe that should have been an indicator that you missed a question in the first round discovery of like, what's your budget, or what are you looking to invest in this? And so now you'll know that for next time that that's an important question for you to bring in. But if it comes back where they go, something changed in our business, we thought we were going to move forward with this, we had some cuts, and now we have a much smaller budget. Okay, now we take a step back, we go back to discovery, we find out a little bit more, then we're going to put what I consider a downsell offer in front of them, something to get them started. It might not give them everything they wanted, but what do you have to offer that would help get them started moving in that direction to meet the need, solve the problem?
Yeah, it's not again and no.
Right.
It's we need to revise.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think when you approach sales from a place of curiosity, like I'm just naturally curious, I'm going to be curious, and my job is just to understand what's going on for you, and do I have a solution? And if so, do I have your permission to put it in front of you? And if so, I'm going to ask you for your business.
Right. And it's the, asking permission, all of those things, because that's, again, as I said, we think the salespeople are going to hit us over the head with it. No, ask permission. And then they'll give you those cute yes or no, but, I was also wondering, you focus on working with women. And we all know Mars are from women. Somebody's from Mars and somebody's from Venus, and all of those things.
Yes.
How is it that women approach sales differently?
Well, I say I focus on working with women. I do work with men as well. I have some great men
Their money works
in my
too.
program. Their money works too. Yes. But I will say that because my approach to sales is very collaborative, and I think women are naturally more collaborators, that it lands really softly to them. I think the thing that scares women off a lot of times is they don't want to be pushy. They don't want to be aggressive. They don't want to go out and hunt big game and, and kill the elephant and like all the stuff that you hear, like old style sales approach. That doesn't resonate with them. So this idea of, can I be successful in my business and learn how to sell in a way that feels good to me and builds relationships? Now, one of the hesitations, I think women, a lot of times the thing they want to fall back on is, I don't want to sell to people. I just want to educate.
Right. I just want to help them.
Yes. I just want to help people. I just want to educate people. When I hear that, I always think, ooh, ideal client for me.
Right. Yeah.
Because chances are you're word vomiting. You're not educating.
Right.
You're talking people out of hiring you unintentionally. And if you could learn how to tailor your approach, you will be more impactful. And frankly, you'll have clients that get better results because you'll understand the sales process. And by understanding the sales process, you'll earn the right business from the right clients who will become great advocates.
Right. Yeah. That old word of mouth thing is very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm working with a delightful young woman. I've hired her to do a project for me. She's just out of college. So, I knew that she was not going to charge me a fortune. But she gave me a written proposal. I was very impressed. And we had an initial call, also she was doing what she, and she sent me the proposal, and then immediately, but if that's too much. And we were on Zoom, and I said, stop it. I said, I came to you because you are the expert. And the second you downgrade yourself, then I'm going to expect that I get that downgrade. And it's, you mentioned this before, sometimes things change. And so if you give them a proposal for, say, $1,000 and they say, our budget has changed, then rather than saying, okay, I'll take the lower budget, we say, what can we take out to get down to that budget? I've done that when we would propose websites. We would say, okay, it's going to cost $2,000. And they come back and they say, well, we can only afford $1,000. Okay, what are we taking out? And the amazing thing is they almost always get back up to the full 2,000. And I mean, it's human nature. We all want to save money, right? But yeah, it's this, when we downgrade ourselves, then they downgrade us also. And, and that's tricky, especially I think as women, because as you said, we want to collaborate. We want to be partners. And, and so we want to make them happy. And if saving money makes them happy, okay.
Yeah. And I think sometimes as women, we feel guilty because the thing that we're doing oftentimes is the service that we're providing or whatever it is in our business. In some ways, it probably feels easy to us, right? Because, and the thing that we often forget is, I had this conversation with a client not too long ago. She was saying, I sometimes feel guilty about raising my prices. And I said, well, let's dig into this a little bit. How many years of experience do you have? And, we talked about our years of experience. I said, now, how many programs have you invested in the last 10 years that have helped you contributed to your skills? So we added it up and it was like $30,000 that she had spent on her education, not a formal education, but programs and things that she was doing to give her a skill set that was unique in her particular industry. So $30,000 and then all of her years of experience. And I was like, so, are any of your clients that they're not having to spend $30,000 and 10 years in order to gain this knowledge? They get to essentially cherry pick right from you. So, how much do you think that knowledge and that time savings is worth? And all of a sudden she was like, I have no problem raising my price now.
Right. Yeah. Long ago, I interviewed this wonderful woman and on the program. Her name is Adrienne Graham. And she wrote an article for Forbes that caught my attention. No, you can't pick my brain. It costs too much.
Yes.
I love it. Right. And her point is very much, how many times do we, as the business owner, the consultant, the whatever, go now, it's a little bit different now because, we might not be meeting in person as much, but we go to Starbucks, to lunch, to whatever, talk with them for an hour and basically tell them everything they need to know. And sometimes they don't even pay for our lunch. And so, right. We're like, oh, I footed the bill. And we told them so much that they don't need to work with us. And I love that concept because yes, we do want to be helpful to people. And sometimes you need those kind of introductory type of coffees at Starbucks or whatever to do the discovery, all of those things. But when all we're doing is giving them all the answers, so then they don't need to hire us, that's not a good plan.
I think there's a couple things I think of here. One, in sales, there should always be a balance of power. I should never hold more power over my client because they'll go away. They'll go find somebody else to work with. They'll feel diminished in some way. If they hold power over me, they'll abuse it. Just like the woman who was like, well, if the price is too high, then people will take advantage of that. So you want to have a balance of power. So one of the things you don't want to do is feel like you have to show up and prove your worth. You don't have to prove how good you are at what you do. So you're giving all of your stuff away for free. So I always say, think about all your expertise and imagine it like it's a big, beautiful beach. And on this beach is laid out all these beautiful, expertise, your knowledge, all the skill set that you bring. And you show up in a conversation with somebody and you go, well, I'm just going to give them a little grain of sand because it'll help them. It's easy for me. And I know it's going to make a difference. But they don't know about the big, beautiful beach behind you. They think that grain of sand is the beach. And now, why would they need to pay you money? You just gave them the beach for free. And yet that grain of sand won't actually get them the result they need.
And then they're annoyed.
yeah, they'll only get, or they won't do anything with it because they didn't pay any money for it. So then when somebody says, what's it like to work with Nikki? They'll go, she's okay. But my clients that pay me the most money, if you ask them what's it like to work with me, they're like, she's worth every penny and
Right.
more. It's like they're serious about it because they've invested in themselves in learning something that is going to make them money. And when somebody asks them, what's it like to work, they're like, I recommend her wholeheartedly.
Right.
Because she's made me money.
Yeah. And we do look at that with, okay, we got this for free or we paid for this. And we value what we paid for. When we used to do special events, people were like, well, let them come for free. No, even if they just paid $10, it's a different commitment level to them. Or if you say, okay, it's 99 and we're going to do it for 50, we're going to give, you still want them to see that value. The whole free thing really did. And, I have a lot of people, especially when they're just starting in business, they say, well, I have to either give my stuff away or I have to deeply discount it, because I want to build that client base. And it's like the young woman that I was hiring to do the project. No, you charge what you are worth now, and I saw something somewhere that said, charge what you're worth and double it. And I love that idea. Now, double was a little scary, right? But, I like that concept because, especially when we're new, we're thinking, I'm new, I don't have the experience, so I'm going to tell them $20 an hour. No, my education, my experience, all that makes it 75. Okay, so I'm going to charge them 150 and then see what happens, but do it confidently, right? Oh, I'm going to charge you 150 is not going to get you $150.
I always push back when somebody says I'm new because it's an identity statement. It's saying something about you. Right. And the fact of the matter is, it's pretty rare that I actually meet anybody who is new. Like I'm not new. Even I mean, now I've been in my business for a while, but when I was on your podcast the first time, 2014, I might have said I'm new, but I wouldn't say that now. Like I know better. I teach my clients, I'm not new. No. I already showed up to your podcast with 20 some years of sales experience. I already had all of these expertise, these skills in neurolinguistic programming. Like I already show up with that. So I am not new. Maybe I'm new in my business. Right. That's different. But I am not new. And you, listener, if you're walking around saying I'm new, chances are you're not. You're showing up with experience. You didn't just decide I'm going to build websites tomorrow and I'm going to charge somebody $8,000 to build them a website, but I've never done it. That's different. That's out of integrity. Right. But if you have built websites for some company that paid you to do it, that all that experience that translates when you start your business and you're helping to build websites for someone.
Yeah. And if somebody tells me I'm new, I immediately, I think I'm going to pay less, and so that's the expectation, right? They're desperate. And, and of course that is the worst thing in sales is for somebody to think you're desperate. And, and that's the hard thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. I always ask for notes before the show. And so one of the notes says, what is the difference between using a cat calling and a dog calling technique? And I'm like, what the heck does that mean?
So that's how I describe curiosity. When I mentioned earlier, step 2 about creating curiosity. So I always think about if you are a dog lover and you call a dog, you do this thing a lot of times where you're like, come here, boy, come here. And it's like this high pitched, like excited things. And dogs really respond to that. They're like, ooh, something fun's going to happen. I'm totally in, right? But you can't call a dog or you can't call a cat like that.
Oh, no.
Right?
They look at you and go,
going to respond. They're like, I don't think so. I'm over here. If you want to pet me, you can come to me. I'm not even going to come to you. And yet a lot of times in sales situations, we show up with what I call dog calling energy. Like, I'm so excited to talk to you. You're an ideal client for me. Oh my gosh, I have all these things to tell you. And then again, we word vomit and we show up with dog calling energy, but people don't respond like dogs. They'll push away.
We're like, oh yeah, we do, right? We take a step back.
Yeah, like, oh, that's too much. So cat calling energy is a little bit more of like, when you want to call a cat, you do this thing where you go, here, kitty, kitty, here, kitty, kitty. So we're just trying to get attention, right? So with cat calling energy and the way to create curiosity, a lot of times it's how you answer questions. So instead of somebody says, well, what do you do? And you talk for 40 minutes about what you do, that's word vomiting, that's dog calling energy. Instead, if you think, what could I say right now that would pique this person's interest? So if somebody says, well, what do you do? I might say, well, I work with women primarily and I teach them how to make more money. I could just say that.
Right.
Now
that's going to pique my interest.
Right? That would probably get a question. And that's where conversation happens, is through questions.
Right.
I'm trying to pique somebody's interest in my response. So I call these here kitty kitty responses. And when you can pique somebody's interest, a lot of times what will happen next is they'll give you a buying signal. And now we're off to the races and we're moving up the staircase. So the idea here is to think about, do you know how to create curiosity? And can you have a few little here kitty kitty responses? Like, somebody said, how are you right now? You might say, fine, but that doesn't initiate conversation.
No. They're like,
instead, what if instead you said something like, oh, I'm great. I just got done teaching a masterclass today.
I'm going to say, oh, what was the masterclass about?
Exactly. Now we get to talk about business stuff, right? So I'm going to be strategic in my response, try to drop something that might be interesting that will initiate conversation. Now, if I say that and you're like, oh, who cares, Nikki? What do you think about the weather?
Right. Then
I'm just
you're not going to go any
the
further, and that's okay.
That's okay. Yep.
Well, oh my gosh, Nikki, we have just flown through this. It has been so much fun, and we have to do it before 8 years again. And who the heck knows where we'll be in 8 years? Oh my gosh. But tell us how people find you and what are the services that you provide.
Okay. The easiest way to find me, I'm going to wrap it around a gift for the listener. It's an ebook. It's called Closing the Sale. It talks through those last couple steps of the selling staircase, gives you some language on how to close. So you can get that by going to yoursalesmaven.com/BPH for Business Power Hour. So that's specific for your listeners. So you can go grab that right now, and then we'll be connected. And if you're, obviously you like podcasts, so check out the Sales Maven podcast.
Right.
You'll get lots of tips on there. And the ways that I work with clients, 3 main ways. I do private one-on-one coaching. I teach master classes once a quarter on a particular deep dive on a sales topic. And I have a group coaching program called the Sales Maven Society. Those are the ways I work with clients.
I love it. And you're on LinkedIn, so people can connect with you there.
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn and Instagram are the 2 places I tend to hang out the most.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Well, Nikki, like I said, we can't wait 8 years to do this again because, well, who knows? It will be interesting to see what happens between now and 8 years, because there's obviously lots of changes coming, lots of cool changes.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing so many, one of the things with COVID is we saw so many people go, I'm going to start my own business, and I know some of them are rethinking that, but there really have been so many changes. So it's going to be fun to see what happens even in the next 2 or 3 years. So we definitely have to do this again. But, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
My final thought is, if there's somebody out there that you suspect would be a great client for you, don't be afraid to approach them and say, would you ever consider us doing business together? Just ask the question and see what happens.
I love it. Yeah, because the least they can do is say no.
Yeah.
The most they can say is, tell me more.
Yes. Amen. I love that. Please let that be the response. And chances are it will be the response often, as long as you ask the question.
Right. Because most people are, they're curious, as you were saying, and they're also not rude.
Right.
So they'll give you a little bit of introduction time, but yeah, and as you said, it is about, building those relationships, because we don't spend money with people we don't know, like, or trust.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, this has been so much fun, and I cannot wait to do it again. I'm Deb Creer. I've been talking with Nikki Rausch of Sales Maven, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.